right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh here with an all star cast, folks. I'm going to be talking to the CEO of SugarCRM. I think they're better than Salesforce, quite frankly. It's easier to use, it's more intuitive, and they've been around for a while too. So they've got some success stories under the belt, and they're doing a bit of a retooling, I hear. So we'll hear from David Roberts and my buddy Ray Wang. That's right. He's not on Fox News right now. He's on Inside Analysis. This guy's on TV every other day talking about what's happening in the world. And there's a lot going on, folks. I mean, goodness gracious, this AI stuff, model context protocol, MCP servers, never seen anything take off faster than that. Like one day there were none. Now there are like 100 of them out there. What does that mean? It means companies are trying to get their data into the AI engines to generate positive results. And that's what all the action is about these days. How do we ground these large language models? Because, of course, they're trained on a wide corpus of data. They're not trained on your enterprise data, and that's what you want them to be trained on. So, what do? A lot of people do RAG architectures, retrieval augmented generation. Some people are doing agentic, where you have a little agent talking to the MCP and then to the LLM and to your enterprise data and kind of stitching stuff together. Probably the best example I've heard is companies that use a knowledge graph in that matrix somewhere, because that carries information about relationships, and that's really important for getting it right for the semantics, the knowledge that you're trying to pass through. But there are lots of ways you could do it, and of course the models change every other freaking day. That's also an issue. When the models change, look when ChatGPT said, okay, this is the new version, and no, you can't use the old versions, and lots of people were like, huh? What was that all about? And of course, Sam Altman said the era of large language models was over 2 years ago before trying to raise a few $1 trillion. So, there's that. But without any further ado, David Roberts, SugarCRM, welcome to Inside Analysis. Tell us, what are you guys working on?
Hey, Eric, thank you so much for having me. Um, we're working on helping sellers sell better. I've been in and around CRM for 30 years, and this promise that a CRM platform can actually help sellers do a better job managing their business has been something that's a little bit elusive. I think we as managers like the comfort that comes from seeing a pipeline or understanding a forecast. It gives us this illusion of control that we can actually influence sales results. And what we're doing at Sugar is trying to crack that code once and for all, be able to turn the value equation on its head and help sellers get more out of a CRM than they put into it.
Yeah, well, that's what an idea there, right? Like get some value from that inference. You're getting inference from your CRM essentially, right? That's
Right.
the idea. You said something before the show that really struck me. You talked about precision selling. And as I was mentioning to you, these LLMs, they really like when you use interesting phrases and whole sentences and concepts. It's not like Google. With Google, it was all about the SEO, search engine optimization, which was usually a scam. I mean, let's be honest. Most of the time people did stuff for an SEO, they were trying to trick the algorithm. They weren't trying to be genuine to the algorithm. They were trying to trick it. So I'm actually kind of happy to see SEO fade. I think it was, sort of 50% real, 50% nonsense. But this precision selling really strikes me as very interesting. Could you describe what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, the way we think we accomplish what I described a minute ago is by offering sellers a precision selling platform. And
Hmm.
that means that, especially for our ideal customer profile, if you're out there in the manufacturing world and you're sitting on top of a massive product catalog, a huge distribution network, a ton of customers, it's impossible to stay on top of it all every day. And if you're one of those sellers, you act as a marketing person some days, you're communicating out to your customer base. You act as a service person some days, you get pulled into escalations from your customers.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to stay on top of everything. And where we see AI and LLMs really helping is guiding the seller to the right step. I think I said earlier, Eric, that just like sellers receive leads from marketing and they qualify and accept or reject leads, what we're doing is offering sellers recommendations, and they can equally accept or reject those recommendations. And those recommendations are built off of understanding the breadth of order data, customer data, opportunity data, and guiding sellers to that precise next step.
See, this is it's very encouraging because number one, this was my thought. Gosh, maybe a year or two ago, maybe longer. I thought to myself, I think most of the value of AI is going to manifest through recommendations. that are tailored on a company's activities, the data of their prospects, and the seller's behavior. And then also they're going to just give an opportunity. So the second cute big thing here is that the human being is still the guardrail. The human being still makes the decision. You were talking about before the show, Tony Stark, how it's still him inside this uniform. So he's got all his intuitions, all his feelings, all his ideas and creativity and energy. And it's really emboldened by the AI around him, right?
Yeah, I've said for a couple decades that selling is about the transference of belief, right?
Mhm.
You as a seller, you as a CEO believe in what you're doing. You transfer that belief. You bring people along with you. That's what selling is. And I don't think, especially for B2B enterprise software, that goes away. I think
Mhm.
selling continues to be the transference of belief. So it needs that human with that intuition, with the understanding of the market. And I think our precision selling platform can be the Iron Man suit to Tony Stark. It can help them be stronger, faster, um, more powerful, but it's still the human inside making those key decisions about how to relate to the person they're trying to relate to.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Ray Wang, I'll bring you in, Constellation Research. Like I say, he's not on Fox News now, he's on Inside Analysis, baby. So, Ray, what do you think about this precision selling concept? I think it's a very clever term that really speaks to what they're trying to provide. And I think the LLMs are going to like it. What do you think?
I think you're not only getting precision selling, you're also getting the ability to actually choose your own adventure. And so both are happening at the same time. So precision selling, super contextual, semantic, amazing. But choose your own adventure means I can start from any point and get to any part of any journey and come back. And so those two things are actually creating what we're calling exponential efficiency and infinite possibilities in this agentic AI world, which means you can start anywhere, do anything, get the precision that you're talking about. But more importantly, we're getting ambient experiences on the back end, which means they're contextual, they're serving them up, and more importantly, they're natural. You're not even thinking about it. So, all those little nudges, all those facial expressions we were talking about earlier, all the context, our intonation, it's all being used to actually make that precision selling more possible.
Yeah, and that's what I picked up on as well. If you look back, you see technologies like Gong, for example, was one of the first where I heard where they're listening in. And this is why you now have Read AI and Fireflies and Otter AI and all these tools are attaching to your video conferencing and using the audio, not just the transcript, but to your
Yep.
point, the engagement level and even the tone of voice, the confidence level. I mean, that is very exciting because, like I was saying, SEO, usually SEO tactics were trying to game the system. But now I think we're getting closer to where a system will genuinely try to ascertain authenticity, and I think that kind of rings true to use the old expression. What do you think, Ray?
Oh, it definitely does. And what we're getting to a point is, it's so easy to create deep fakes. It's so hard to figure out authenticity. And what we're
Mm.
actually getting to is the ability to extract that signal from the noise, and more importantly, figure out is it real? Is it not real? Do we care about authenticity? Maybe you do care about authenticity and you're willing to pay more for authenticity. That's also going to emerge.
That's interesting. And you brought up a really good point, too, about being able to go anywhere in the journey. And I think this is a really critical point to understand in the evolution of business and the nexus of business and technology. Because what is CRM? Every software application you use is automating something. That's what it does. It automates something, whether it's word processing or analytics or whatever. But what's interesting now is that the walls are sort of caving to the APIs, if you will, and you can now crawl across systems from the sales world to the marketing world to the admin world to the projections world, projections and forecasting and all that kind of stuff. And that's when people really learn. And I think that's one of the most compelling values that these LLMs bring, especially the better they get at avoiding hallucinations, is you can become an expert in almost any topic pretty darn quickly. And that's good for everyone because I think most of the problems that occur in organizations happen due to lack of communication, lack of clear objectives and processes, and just personality issues. And a lot of that stuff goes out the window if you really can learn about what other people are doing. Because when you know what it takes to do the sale, then you're more respectful of that process. It's when you don't know that you start asking questions and you presume people aren't doing their stuff. So I think that's very exciting. Maybe, David, I'll throw it over to you. I think in this new LLM enabled world, AI enabled world, you're going to get marketers who know more about sales than ever before. You're going to get administrators who know more about creative projects, and everyone is going to have a better understanding of what everyone else is doing. And that is good news for the business. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. The strange thing about sellers is they're this odd combination of hugely optimistic. You've got to be in sales. You wake up every day like you lost yesterday, you're going to go win today,
Right.
and
Oh, no.
productively paranoid. Right?
Ooh.
You've got to be productively paranoid too. You got to be constantly wondering yourself, what's the next objection? How could this deal go wrong? So this odd combination of optimism and productive paranoia, I think, is something at the heart of every good salesperson. So when you offer them up recommendations, they gotta be believable, right? Just
Mhm.
like when you go into search today and you can click in to understand the source of the information that ChatGPT is offering. That's what sellers need to see. They need to be able to believe that whatever you're recommending is grounded in something that they can
Mhm.
believe in, right? Because
Yeah.
they want to make sure they're going to look good in front of their customer. They're going to look good in front of their prospect. They're not going to like suggest somebody go buy a product that they already own and make them look stupid. So that context and giving people guiding them to that answer is really important.
Yeah. That's a good point. Go ahead, Ray.
Context is key. That's exactly the point, right? Once you have
Context is
context,
key.
authenticity, you can do a lot more with it. And this is really why I get really excited about where that future is, because we've been trying to get to this personalization for years, not just on the consumer side, but now on the selling side, and more importantly, trying to create that match. And we're actually going to get to a point where you have multi-sided marketplaces selling, brokering context so that you can actually get to a deal.
That's interesting. Context is king, and I was mentioning before the show about Google's empire and how it's really in jeopardy right now because SEO is how they made their money. I mean, really, they almost became muscle bound to a certain extent because the SEO, the AdWord business, got so successful that you'd go there and search for something, you got to scroll and scroll to get an organic link somewhere.
Yeah,
And I learned the hard way that the organic links aren't all that organic either. If you're not buying AdWords, you're not
right.
showing up in these organic. I mean, these, people have presumed now for years that Google is some sort of public service and they're just going to give you the correct answer that it knows. No, they're a for-profit business. YouTube is a for-profit business. LinkedIn, Instagram, all these guys, and they all
Yep.
pull the strings sooner or later when they need to make some money. So that's when it's like, oh, wait, why aren't we getting the results we were getting? Maybe because you're not spending enough. I mean, you just have to do
Don't tell
that,
anyone
right?
that. Don't tell anyone
I know.
that.
I'm in radio, so I have to be honest with people. I have to tell them what's going on. But this context stuff, we're saying before the show, we believe that text is such a rich medium for communication, but it's only because we have all these years of context in our heads that we can parse that information and we know who we're talking to, what they normally talk about. So all of that kind of gets carried along with you when you're walking through the world. Agents don't have that information. AI agents don't have that. So that's why you see all this focus now. That's why arguably IBM just bought Confluent, which was an interesting development because guess what? All the providers have their Kafka managed service. So they're like, oh man, that open source stuff will get you. It's all about the context. And throw it back over to David. At Sugar CRM, you have lots of context because you've been selling, you're doing the customer relationship management that requires information about products, services, customers, all kinds of things. That's context, right?
It is. Yeah, and I think if AI is going to really deliver in a business context, it's going to need all of that background, right? Like this is our overall sales process, all the sales stages, all the entrance and exit criteria, right? As part of CRM implementations, you're going to have to give the underlying models all of that background. You're going to have to
Mm.
teach them about your ideal customer profile or your unique sales propositions. The more context you can give to the underlying system, the better you're going to be able to guide sellers. And I think that's a huge change. It used to be in implementing CRM, you just need to load in the data, right?
Mm.
And do some configuration work. Now you need to provide content in CRM so that you can guide sellers to that next best action. You've got to give them
Hmm.
the competitive information, the sales process information. I think CRM implementations are going to look really different over the next couple of years compared to what they've been since I started doing it in 1994.
Wow. That's pretty interesting stuff too. So you're right. We used to just load the simple flat files, CSV files into a system, and okay, these are the customers, these are prospects. So much of that stuff was so manual for so long. It reminds me of the earlier solutions, which were just absolutely dreadful. You put some rule in place that say you must include a note. And I'm like, okay. So half the people just stop using it. Half the
Totally.
people will do huge long notes that are very useful, but completely different from everyone else's notes. And then what happened? The systems were slow as all bejesus. They were like frozen molasses. And guess what happens when you're like, use that system? Forget about it. Just move on.
Right.
So the stuff, these insights, they have to be liquid in a sense. They have to be right there, fluidly available to you, right, Ray?
Definitely. And that fluidity is what really makes it work because if you can actually take more steps or automate more steps in the process to get to an answer, you're actually going to come ahead, right? So here's the deal, right? I have a good friend that says this, like if you're up against a grandmaster in chess, you're probably going to lose. But if you get two or three more shots at for every move that the grandmaster in chess gets, you actually have a chance of winning, right? And that's really what we're trying to get to. We're getting at more at bats, more precise, and more importantly, that means you're going to actually have a higher success rate. And that's where we're seeing that automation and the agentic AI come together because that's when we actually have the ability to not only know where to go hit, we actually going to hit with a higher level of precision, and that's actually drive your results. And so we're actually allocating resources to be more precise more often in the right area. That's where you're going to see some advantages in precision selling.
Well, that's interesting. Precision selling. I really like this term. And it makes a lot of sense because the other side of the equation, and we'll pick this up in the second segment here in just a minute, but the other side of the equation is that sales is a game of morale. And I've always said that morale is the single most important quotient of any organization because when morale is high, good things are going to happen. When morale is low, you can have all the money, all the technology, great business plans, everything, and it's not going to happen because the morale isn't there. Morale is what drives people forward. It's what picks up the phone. Morale is what types the email and builds the proposal and gets everyone excited. And then the other thing, and this is really, really cool for salespeople, I guarantee every seller will agree with this. When you make a sale, you're riding high, man. You're like, yes, I made a sale. And then you can go make another sale because you're in a good mood and you're just rolling. And then you make another sale. Whereas if you're not making any sales, you're not getting anywhere. It's the opposite effect. So it's a very emotional roller coaster is selling. And we want to preserve that, but we want to keep it as positive as possible. So we want to soften any of the downsides and really embellish the upsides. And that's what keeps morale up and keeps people rolling. And we'll talk about that after the break, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, your host, Eric Kavanagh, with David Roberts, CEO of SugarCRM, and Ray Wang of Constellation Research. And we're just talking about morale in sales. And David, you've got some interesting perspective on that. What do you think about morale in sales and those compensation plans, all those incentives that are supposed to get them rolling?
Yeah. Well, I think it's like a lot of things. Confidence breeds confidence, right? You look at hitting streaks in baseball. It's not because
Right,
the pitchers are any different or the
right.
batting stance is any different. It's they start getting hits, they feel more confident, their mental mindset's different, and it begets more hits. I think that's true in sales as well. You have that confidence, you have that swagger, you convey that to your prospect, you convey that to your customer. They believe in what you're saying. So back to this, selling is the transference of belief. I think morale and winning builds that belief.
Yeah, you make an excellent point here about batting averages and the fact that batters get on a roll. And it's amazing because it is a head game. I mean, there's so much that comes into play. You have to see it, you have to understand the pitching, you have to kind of know where you want to go with these things. But and I love baseball. One of my greatest accomplishments is that my 12-year-old daughter loves baseball.
I
She
love
loves
it.
the Pirates. She trash talks the other teams. I'm like, yes, yes. And we've got, I mean, O'Neill Cruz. This guy, I saw him hit a home run last year. I told the wife, that's the fastest ball I've ever seen leave a bat in baseball. 30 seconds later, the announcer goes, that is the fastest baseball ever. And I'm like, wow, dude, I was right, dude. He just like 123 miles an hour off the bat or something. And that is because his mind was in the right place. You have the technique, you have all the stuff that leads up to it, but it's still the person in the moment. And that's where morale really plays its role. What do you think, Ray?
I think morale is everything, as Dave was saying, because here's the thing. Uh, if you're not confident about how you're selling, if you're not confident about the product, if you're not confident about your opportunity to sell, you're just going to fail. I
Right.
mean, this is all about confidence. And if you
Right.
can't drive that, you don't have a shot. And
Yeah.
so what we're noticing is like if you can arm your sellers with the right information, with the right insights so that
Mm.
they can build a pattern of being more confident, now you're actually talking about improving your sales team, not just morale, but you're improving their performance. And
Hmm.
so this is the number one problem with most SFAs and more sales products is because it was all designed for management. It was never
Totally.
designed for the salesperson. And so when we empower the salesperson, they have a shot at actually saying, oh, this was worth it, right? And now when we get to the point with AI and automation where we can actually collect everything contextually, so they're not having to type everything in because the data is being collected ambiently, now we actually have a shot for actually empowering your salespeople. And you can get back to your point of, salespeople actually are now empowered to actually do something as opposed to having the system work against them. And so comp plans are, I mean, they're important, but now you can actually get really creative with your comp plans because people are willing to trade more data for more insights for better comp.
Right. Well, and I can tell you one of the mistakes I've seen, and I've heard about this for 3 decades of being in business, comp plans that get changed when the salespeople become effective at it. It's like, wait a minute, like, what are you talking about? You told me if I sold these, I'd get all this extra money. They're like, oh, you're making too much money. There
I love
is that
moving your
factor
cheese.
that's out there, right? This, whether, oh, you're making too much money. What are you talking about? It's the salesperson, right? You got to reward your salespeople, right, David?
Yep. Yeah, and nothing makes me happier than a salesperson making too much money.
There
It's
you
a
Yeah, I mean,
go.
fantastic. I mean, how can that not be a great scenario? I do
yeah, how
think,
can that not be good? I mean, this is ridiculous. Okay, it's like we're one of the only companies in our category where we don't have a cap on comp. Like, why would you do that? It's like
yeah, we
dumbest
don't
thing I've
cap
ever
it either.
seen.
That's
Like
Yeah,
that's
why
we
would
just
you do
crazy.
this?
That's
we
crazy.
So
don't cap it either. I think motivation. You talk about morale and motivation. I think sellers are the best sellers are internally motivated, and they see comp plans as a recognition of their efforts, a recognition of their performance. I don't actually think it's a comp plan that motivates. I think it's a comp plan that recognizes and rewards. I think when I go out looking for sellers, I'm looking for people who are competitive, who have a confidence, who can communicate clearly. There's some intrinsics, and a lot of those things are things that sellers value themselves on. And then when you pay them a whole bunch because they perform really well, they're like, yeah, I've deserved this, I've delivered. But it's not actually what's driving the behavior.
Yeah. Well, and to your point earlier, and this is something I'd like to dig deeper into, we now have so much context through these systems. It used to be that it took like overnight batch processes or like once a month or something, and that's a certain cadence you can get accustomed to. But now in this world of AI empowered technology, well, guess what? People have expectations that are very high. I want to be able to get to answers very, very quickly. And when you can feed your salespeople in real time with all sorts of good context, even when they're on the phone with someone, that's very empowering because now, like, some of the more sophisticated systems can even be listening into the transcript and then keying up ideas as someone's talking. Now, that is forward looking. And I
yeah.
guess I'll throw it over to David to comment on that. Only go as far as you can go reasonably in your organization. Don't try to do too much too fast. But this is the objective to get where the salespeople have everything they could possibly need to continue the conversation, to ask better questions, and to keep that ball rolling. Right, David?
Well, and we keep telling sellers, go spend time with your customer, talk to them about things. And I think lots of times sellers aren't quite sure what to go talk about, right? If
Mm,
you can tee them up, if you can say, look, you've got a 10,000 product catalog, which is impossible for anyone to get their heads around.
right,
And we have enough insight and context to be able to say, these 5 customers aren't reordering these products. Go ask them why. What's
right.
changed, right? Is it something we've done? Is it something you've done? And it gives them the confidence to be able to have that conversation, to have something to talk about that's meaningful to that customer and leads them in the right direction.
Yeah, meaningful conversation. That's a really good point, David. I'll throw it over to Ray. That one example he just gave is very compelling because here's something to talk about. This is called a leading indicator. It's like, huh, they're not buying these products from us anymore. What's going on? Did the market change? Is someone offering a better price? But when you can come with a very specific question that is highly relevant to the account, that's the kind of stuff the person on the other end is going to want to talk about, right, Ray?
It is. And I think when you're able to mine the database, mine actually all your interaction history over time and understand what questions work in what context, it gives you another weapon that you actually wouldn't have had before. Now you're armed with potential options that some of your best sellers have done within your different teams. That really gives everybody a reason to use their system. And
Hmm.
so looking at, let's say, hey, you're selling to a mid-market manufacturer. They are looking for a system that they couldn't get to before, and you've not done all the objection handling, all the options are out there. That's awesome, right? Now you're like,
Hmm.
okay, let's go after each one. Let's go after each one. Let's think about the cadence. How often do you reach out? Oh, wait, the year end close is here. Oh, by the way, you know what? They just had a new CEO like 3 months ago. Wait, that actually changes the conversation. And they just hired
Totally.
another person. And so having that intelligence, that's the G2 you need.
Yeah. Well, it's like so in the data world, we talk about data pipelines. And what we're really talking about here is like content pipelines. It is data, but it's like a context pipeline that's in the background, kind of waiting for you to start asking questions, waiting for you to get on a call somewhere. And then if you have that context pipeline relatively fluid, lubricated, if you will, you're going to get the right information to the salesperson in time. They don't want too much. You don't want to overload people, but they do want just enough to keep the conversation going, right, David?
Yeah, and I think some of the flaws of CRMs in the past is they take sellers into these giant dashboards and expect them to go pick the nuggets out of a whole bunch of different charts. It's
Hmm.
really hard to go figure that out. I think sellers want it served up to them, and I think that's where the promise of CRM from 30 years ago finally has a chance of coming true, because AI can guide the sellers to that answer.
Or rigid sales methodologies that force
Right,
everybody to do the same thing. That's even worse, right? I was like, oh God, I don't like that model, right? You want sales by design. You want sales by context. You want people to have choice. And each of your sellers, I mean, while you want them to have some similar approaches, you're going to want them to figure out what's the right angle. Because
right.
now that you've got AI there, you're counting on people's experience to figure out which tool to apply at which point in time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you know what else you can do, and I'm curious, David, if you have some insights on this, is look for buy signs. Like I learned this working with Dr. Robin Bloor years ago. He would refer to this. I'm like, what is he talking about? Buy signs, like something that they say in the conversation, which goes, aha, so they are interested in this because they asked that question. Is that something that you've seen can be to some extent automated, or what do you think about that, David?
I think for sure. I think there are buying signals. Whenever you're buying enterprise software and you start talking about the details of the implementation,
Right.
you've moved beyond the decision of buying the software. You're actually
Yeah.
thinking about how you're going to go implement it and how you're going to go
Right.
roll it out, right?
Right.
Every, and this isn't just true of CRM, it's true of all enterprise software. You need to go buy the software, implement it, and roll it out. And all three of those things happen in succession. If people are talking about the decision after the one you're talking to them about, you know that those are good buying signals. And I think not all sellers have great ears. They're not tuned in to listen to those signals. So I think AI can play a huge role there.
That's funny. I do pretty good imitations, and I was cracking jokes to the wife about some guy we keep seeing on TV. He sells some kind of patch, and he has a great line. He goes, "If you're thinking about buying, that means you need it." I was like, "This guy's thinking, right?
Right,
He's like, right. If you're thinking about it, that means there is a need that you have, which you believe this can solve, and so we want that. What you call it, trust or transference of belief, right, David?" You want to
right.
transfer that belief. Okay, I'll give you a shot with this, with your product, and then I'll check it out. But then the cool thing, Ray Wang, I'll throw this over to you, is now we can monitor and map lots more complicated processes than before. It used to be, oh, I can tell if this ad is working, or I can tell one bit or piece of the puzzle if it's working. But now we have the capacity to really do deeper analysis across context flows and workflows and opportunity windows and all that stuff, right?
Eric, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're operating at machine scale. I mean, what might have taken you like 2 weeks to run a forecast is now taking you 2 seconds, right?
Right.
That's the scale that's happening. What might have taken you basically like 2 weeks to run a territory plan, you might be able to do it in 2 minutes, right?
Wow.
That's how fast is it. So all the options are there, all the scenarios are there, the simulation capabilities are in front of you. The question is really like which tool to use. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, David.
No, I was agreeing. Completely right.
Yeah,
Well, and And a CRM tool, let's be honest, it's like a car. I mean, how many CRM tools do you buy in your life? You probably buy one about as often as you buy a car. It's like 5 to 7 years or so. And moving off of one is not an easy prospect either. Like, oh God, it's the technical debt, and we're going to lose all this information. So it's, uh, you have a lot of due diligence that's done leading up to the process of buying a CRM, right, David?
Yeah, it's true, but I'll go back to something Ray talked about with fluidity. Like, I think the technologies of today are making all this stuff a lot more fluid, right? When I grew up at Accenture, I was building data conversion routines and batch jobs and all these kind of things. You now can move data around at a huge amount of speed. You don't need to do field to field mappings. AI can figure that out for you. So I think the barrier of change is dropping a little bit. And I think organizations are going to be able to be more fluid in making those car buying decisions.
That's interesting. What do you think, just to throw a curveball into the equation here? I'm seeing a number of technologies come along that are delivering insight and value without needing a data warehouse. And we've spent years and years, and this is where I came into the picture through the data warehouse industry, building these big honking data warehouses. Now, of course, you've got Snowflake and Databricks, Amazon has Redshift, Teradata is still out there doing their thing. But are we moving into an era where we may not need to put so much effort into all that upfront heavy lifting to get all this data in one place since we can have a more fluid interaction with data? David Roberts, I'll throw it over to you and then Ray maybe comment. What do you think about
Well,
that?
I think if I go back 20 years, people were building data warehouses and they were creating all the data structures down at the base layer, right?
Hmm.
And then they were creating visualizations of that data structure. Today, all you need to do is throw all the data in one place. You don't have to get it all organized, and you're using other technologies to be able to provide that
Right.
organization for you, but it needs the context.
Hmm.
We're going to keep using this word context. This is the word of 2026 is
Yes.
AI and context.
Right.
But the data all needs to be accessible and it all needs to be understood. And you've got to provide the LLMs enough that they can figure out how to use it in the business processes it's serving.
Yeah, that's right. Ray, what are your thoughts there?
I was having nightmares of mapping vendor fields to business component fields,
Wasn't
but
that
that's
fun?
okay. Sorry, I didn't want to get all geeky on you. Like, why would
No.
I want to do that again?
Oh,
But
it's brutal.
but here's the thing, right? You're right. I mean, Eric, with the data warehouse, I mean that was the begin all end all. But now you can actually just map fields where you need to, and I think what you really got to get good at is your ability to look at data integration, and be able to do that at scale. But it doesn't matter where you're coming from, right? That's the whole point behind the data lake was I just need to know where everything is, point to
Right.
it, and move. I might
Hmm.
not update it all at once. I might update it later. I'll update when I need to update it, and that kind of that's the game changer. But your data strategy is still everything. You've got messy data, you're going to be
Hmm.
stuck, right? And the better you can get at mapping, and the better you can get at data quality, you're going to be in a better place. And Eric, you and I have talked about data governance for years. I mean, think about
Right.
that. I mean,
It's
it's
finally
it's back
here.
to that. So it's
It's
back.
It
It's
never
again.
left. It
I
never
know.
left.
It never
It
left.
never left, but it really, it was. I remember there was a first fad around data governance probably 15 years ago. And then it kind of faded a bit. And now it's come roaring back, in part because of this forcing function called AI. If you don't get your data house in order and start pointing LLMs at your enterprise data, boy, you're going to be up for some real surprises real fast. But folks, don't touch that dial. We're listening to Inside Analysis. We'll be right back. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis with an all-star cast, David Roberts of SugarCRM and Ray Wang of Constellation Research. And Ray, corporations want to buy the AI. And what does that even mean these days?
We're just laughing about this, right? So we've talked to about like 30 CEOs, and they basically come up and say, look, we want to buy the AI. And so I'm like kind of amused. I'm like, what does that mean? And so we've asked them, well, what does it look like? And they'll talk about CRM or a supply chain, or talk about like a service product, or they'll talk about something that's happening in procurement. And we're like, well, how much does the AI cost you today? And they're like, well, your business process costs you today, or whatever you're trying to do. And they're like, oh, it costs me 100 million. And I'm like, oh, well, imagine if I could get to you for 15 million, would you buy the AI? And they get really excited. Like, I have budget for the AI. That's exactly what I want. And then I realized this is how Palantir sells. They
Wow.
basically ask you, what do you want? And they build it and custom order. And so you got services company productizing, and you got product company servitizing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I bought the outcome, you asked for it, and now it's being delivered. And this is why everyone else seems to be overcomplicating their sale in AI, when actually Customers just want to buy the AI, whatever that looks like to them.
Right. Don't overcomplicate it. Let
They're
me tell you, I've
complicated.
been in, so not to name any names here, but I've been in sales journeys and I know the sale is made. And I'll be with people who then keep talking on our side, like, shh, stop talking, bro.
Right.
Like the
Shut up,
sale
shut
is
up, shut
done.
up,
Let's
shut
get
up.
off the phone and go. Let's send the contract. But David, what are your thoughts about this?
I totally agree. I'm not sure people know exactly what they want. Back to Ray's point, everyone else is doing it. I ought to be doing it. What does
Right.
that look like for me? Right. The analogy for me is people call us up and they're like, "Hey, are you SOC 2 Type 2?" Right. If you go back to these compliance certificates, the, that's a means to an end. What they actually want is availability, reliability, security, the things that SOC 2 Type 2 gets you to. They want the outcome, and they're
Right.
using shorthand by saying, are you SOC 2 Type 2? I think AI is a little bit that way, where people are like, we want to know what you do with AI. Um, and what we come back, it's all about reframing things. You come back and you say, yeah, what you should be asking you is how I guide your sellers to the right focus and keep them from being
Right.
distracted and reactive. That's actually what they want. They just are talking about the means to an end rather than the end in and of itself because they're not quite sure how to connect the dots between the means and the end.
That's very interesting. And you reminded me of something. I'll just kind of throw this out as an interesting curveball. I'll throw it over to Ray. When I was talking to Dr. Moshe Cohen, the guy who designed Israel's Iron Dome, he said one of the real breakthroughs they had was recognizing they need to focus on what they can't see as opposed to what they can see. And I
Huh.
was like, how interesting is that? So you're dealing with radar, and it's very intense stuff. It goes out there, bounces off, something comes back. You got to be able to understand what you're looking at. Once they decided to focus on what they could not see, that's where the breakthrough came through. And I thought that's fascinating. Ray, what do you think?
Let me riff off that. That actually makes sense. And when we're talking about AI and agentic AI and automation, what we really want to think about is not where we automate, but where we insert the human. When and where insert the human becomes important. Is it
Right.
regulatory compliance? Is it because we can't build an algorithm? Is it because we're not precise enough? Is it because you want to have that human touch? Now, back to your Iron Dome analogy, here's why it gets really interesting. How much is it for a Patriot missile today? It's about 2 million. How much is it to get a drone? Somewhere between 20,000 $2,000 to $20,000 a drone. This is exponential efficiency because if you throw drones at 2,000 bucks a pop into the Iron Dome, it's going to confuse the system. And this is what we're at this moment. We're at an exponential efficiency scale people can't even imagine. And that's why it's a 10x, 100x, 1000x efficiency. And more importantly, there's infinite possibilities. And this is what we keep telling people. It's exponential efficiency with infinite possibilities when we're walking into this agentic AI world.
Yeah, and you bring up an excellent point, and I think that a couple things I'll throw out there at David to comment on. One, AI is successful when you focus on a center of gravity, when you focus on something that really matters. And I think that success in this era will happen in pockets all around the industry, and the companies that know what their DNA is and know what they do really well and focus on accelerating that and really nailing that to the wall, they're the ones who are going to succeed wildly. I mean, you're going to see a lot of disruption in markets as a handful of companies really figure things out. You think TikTok, for example, with their algorithm. You think Temu and Shein, these are Chinese companies, right? They really figured out one really important thing and just crushed it. But what do you think, David?
Well, it's the crossing the chasm story, right? From decades ago, figuring out what you're really good at and leaning into it. And I think that's especially true with AI because context matters so much. My team makes fun of me a little bit. I've talked about the ABCs of technology, right? There's AI, BI, CI. For me, BI was the promise of 10 years ago. AI is the promise of today. But in both cases, unless you can get the CI, what I call contextual intelligence,
Oh,
you can't really make a difference. So narrowing in, right? You describing narrowing in and being really good at something, that brings high context, and it's sugar that helps us allow precision because without that, we're not going to be trusted by the sellers or trusted by the customer.
well, and there's also all this first party data. And so if you have a good CRM, you've got a lot of first party data that you
You
can
do.
leverage. And that's valuable because you can find little nuggets in there, little things. It takes some time to play around with it. And that's the human side. Don't rely on just the machines to tell you what's in there. You want the humans interacting with that data, with those insights, with those suggested workflows, for example. That's where the magic occurs. It's always going to occur in the person's brain using
right?
what the AI came up with, right?
I mean, this is what I think is the irony of this a bit. People are worried that AI is going to replace humans. I actually think AI makes the value of humanness even more important, right? Because it's all the emotion, all the intuition, all the things that like we can still leverage. That's very hard to replicate with LLMs and technology, but it allows us to be able to use that in a more narrow, focused way.
That's interesting. Well, and it also it fills the main, right? I tell people this, and Ray, I'll get your comments on it. LLMs are consensus engines more than anything. They're going to give you the average of what they've seen in a particular domain. So it's up to you to fine tune that. It's up to you to add the polish to first of all start the journey with the prompt with some ideas and then finish the journey. AI is going to help you kind of in the middle. What do you think?
Well, I mean, when we look at classical AI, 2 + 2 = 4 100% of the time. When we look at generative AI, 2 + 2 might equal 4 90% of the time with little model drift rag. And now we're at agentic AI where 2 + 2 = 4. What do you want to do about it? Right. That's the way we should be framing this. Right.
What do you want to
I
do
don't
about
want generative AI. I don't want like probabilistic models solving deterministic problems. That's messed up.
it? Right.
Right. But, if I do want, probabilistic models, yes, that's the way to go. And I'm going to have to go tune these. So in the
Yeah.
enterprise, I don't think we want that much probabilistic. Creative, if you're doing marketing, if you're trying to stretch, simulation, forecast, yes, let's do it.
Right.
But make sure that the data sets are good to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, so I had this epiphany a while ago with these models. Watching even Andrew Ng, who is a real pioneer in the space, brag about getting a model to 90% accuracy. I'm like, okay, what part of your business can be wrong 10% of the time? The answer is
We always
not
do this
much.
all the time. Look, hey, I mean, look, let's take 90%, even 90%. 90% accuracy in supply chain. Ooh, that's bad. You're
That's
losing a
brutal.
million dollars a minute. 90% accuracy in customer experience. Okay, maybe 90% accuracy in finance. Anybody want to go to jail?
Right.
90% accuracy in healthcare? Not happening.
Right.
So
How
Right.
about in sales, Ray? I might take 90% accuracy if I
I'll
can
take
get
90%
sellers.
accuracy in sales. Let's take it in sales.
So,
I'll
well,
take
yeah,
70% accuracy in sales.
right.
There you go.
You have to know where, when, and how to use these things. And kind of to your point earlier, Ray, companies wanted to buy the AI. It's like, all right, time out. Like there are lots of
We
different
have to
kinds of
sell them the
AI.
AI. If we sell them the AI, we're all going to do well.
Right. If I could just lower my
God bless
scruples
Ford
a
deployed
little bit,
engineers.
like just open the door a bit. So, oh, okay, we'll go ahead and buy into the scam. No, but these things are very, very powerful. That's the allure. But now you have to understand it. Like, for example, RAG. Everyone talks about RAG. Some of the smarter people I hear talk to say, no, RAG is never going to get you there. It's never going to get you to 99%. Agentic might get you to 99%. But graph, you mentioned Palantir, they use a graph. They have a knowledge graph. It's sort of an ontology, which is a foundational component of their service offering. So over time, if you use a knowledge graph in conjunction with a CRM, in conjunction with MCP and with an LLM, that's when you start to get somewhere, right, David?
Yeah, I think so. I think that feedback loop is really important. That's what builds the confidence in the LLMs, right? And that's what sellers want to see too. Hey, if you point me at these 5 accounts that are seeing downsell and I go follow up with 2 of them, did I actually see a change? If you can show me the result of me following up on what was recommended to me, and that help me win more, help me make more money.
Right.
I'm just going to do it more and more and more. So I think being able to demonstrate to people what that graph looks like, I think is pretty powerful.
And I will say in our podcast bonus segment that's coming up here in a moment, but I remember noticing Google probably 3 years ago now, around the time you started seeing them try to finish sentences. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. They are also making recommendations in my Gmail saying, hey, do you want to follow up on this? And what I noticed is it was pretty good. So I'll be like, actually, I do want to follow up with that. Yes, I have to send a proposal. Thank you. And I'll end this segment with a great cliche, which I just love. It says, man doesn't need to be taught so much as reminded. And that's what the AI can do for us. But folks, we'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, time for the podcast bonus segment here. Natives are getting restless. Ray Wang is on the call. He's like, what did I sign up for here? 1 hour, baby. It's a radio, 1 hour program, coast to coast. We'll be broadcasting in on KSHP during CES coming up. And AI is in consumer world now too, right? Consumer stuff is everywhere. Enterprise is my bailiwick sort of, but the consumer space, they're kind of crossing over. But I was in an Airbnb in California a few months ago, and their laundry machine had an AI mode. I'm like, really? Is AI necessary? Like, will it detect if there's a real shirt in there or not, or what the hell's going on here? So there is a certain hype aspect to the AI world, and I think that's a bit damaging to the industry because we already have tremendous misconceptions about this stuff. And maybe that's one I'll throw at each of you, David. First of all, what's the biggest misconception you see with people who talk about AI these days and how it intersects with CRM?
Well, I think it's pretty similar to how people have thought about software and technology for a long time. That if you just plug it in, it'll fix
Right,
things for you, right?
right. That's
Um,
funny.
I remember years ago at Accenture, someone said we were talking about outsourcing back then. Those days have changed in a lot of ways, but people said if you outsource a mess, you get an outsourced mess.
Right.
And I think that's true of enterprise software. I think it's true of AI, which is why um, I think one of the real focus areas in 2026 is companies like ours are going to be helping companies with AI readiness effectively, right? How
Mm.
good is your data? How good is your content? Are the underlying foundational elements that allow AI to be at its best in the place they ought to be? And if they're not, what do I go do about it?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, AI ready, getting AI ready. We did a show on that, and some guy said no one's AI ready. It's like you're probably right about that. It's like marriage. Like, all right, are you ready to get married? Like you think you are, and then like, all right, here we go. I'm
Right?
married to an AI now. But Ray, what do you think? What are the big misconceptions you're seeing?
I think the biggest misconception is that we're going to completely replace all the humans, and I think that's not going to be true. I think what we're seeing though is people with more experience, people with greater depths, they're actually very valuable. People can connect the dots are even more valuable in different disciplines that haven't been mapped out. So I think that's number one. I think the second misconception is the fact that AI is going to take over the world. At least LLMs are going to take over the world. That's not going to happen with LLMs. They don't have the capability to go do that. And then I think the third one is the fact that AI budgets are more, let's say, super expensive. And what I mean by that is people aren't seeing like the benefits from the AI because they're reading these weird studies on how 95% of projects fail. And you're like, well, those are pretty bad projects to begin with. They weren't implemented
Right?
correctly. And back to Dave's point, the point is you got to have the guide. You got to have you got to help them be able to do that transition properly.
Yeah.
Because these projects were demonstration projects and POCs that were designed as vanity POCs, as we call them.
Right.
And
Yep.
those aren't going to succeed in the long run.
Right, that's a good point. I'd like to close out on something I mentioned earlier, which is this centers of gravity. And I think that organizations that really understand the important centers of gravity in their tech stack and their organization and focus on that are going to succeed. And David, I'll throw it over to you. You're in a good position because CRM data is very rich information about your products, your services, your customers, the content that's used to communicate. All of these factors really gel in the CRM and then deliver. And you have other stuff like data experience platforms and CDPs and all the stuff that's kind of around. But to
Yep.
me, CRM is really at the heart of connecting sales with operations and marketing and
Yeah.
vision. But what do you think?
Well, and I think a lot of the centers of gravity are going to come together as well, right?
Hmm,
So we
interesting.
talk a lot about leveraging ERP data in the front office, right? All this back office data that is been built by people who are very data minded, very process minded, very anally retentive in the back office, right? And sellers don't work that way. So how do you take all that data and recontextualize it so sellers can make some use of it, give them the right recommendations and point them in the right direction? Like I think we're going to see ERP and CRM come together, right? I also have said for a long time, one of my engineers said this to me a while ago, that structured data is the language of business and unstructured data is the language of relationships.
Hmm.
Well, you can now take all this unstructured data and make sense of it all. So I think we're just going to see lots of convergence that's going to allow enterprises to operate better.
Yeah, I think that's right. And a final thought, maybe I'll throw it over to Ray. I had this epiphany as I was thinking about these LLMs a couple years ago now, and I came up with a concept I called the executive cockpit, where basically you have what you've done is you've built a vector database of your own, and you've trained it with as much information as you can from all your systems, ERP, CRM, supply chain, everything, even emails, whatever you have access to, and then you set up Kafka topics into this space where the executive can then ask any question about the business and get answers of what's happening anywhere in the business at any point in time. That is the future of business management. So instead of like waiting for your meeting to get reports from people, you already know what's happening and you can start talking about what we're going to do about it. But what do you think, Ray?
Oh, definitely. We're heading towards situational awareness. I mean, that's really where all this is
That's
headed.
it. Yeah.
So once we get to situational awareness, you have such huge levels of context that almost everyone can be doing things. The real question is, can you actually slow the process down and operate at human scale with machine scale? And
Right.
that's going to be a question everyone's going to be asking. But we're not there yet. We still got a lot to instrument. We still got a lot of context to capture. We still have a lot of automation to get to. We still have a lot of learning of these systems. So I think there's still a lot of opportunities out there for people to shape that future.
Yeah, well, look these gentlemen up online. David Roberts, Sugar CRM CEO, and Ray Wang of Constellation Research. And send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com if you want to be in this show. Next year, we'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.